The stars had always been kind to the Valkyrie people. For 10,000 years, they had looked up at the night sky of their homeworld and felt peace. Their planet, Velketh Prime, was a beautiful place of rolling green hills, deep blue oceans, and forests that glowed with soft light when darkness came. The Valkyrie themselves were gentle beings. They stood tall, with skin that produced its own light, a soft glow that changed color with their emotions. Blue meant calm, green meant joy, and when they were afraid, their light would flicker like a candle in the wind. They had joined the Galactic Concord 300 years ago. The Concord was a union of 47 different species from across the galaxy. It promised protection, trade, and friendship. The Valkyrie had believed those promises. They had opened their world to visitors. They had shared their knowledge of plants and medicine. They had trusted that the galaxy would care for them as they cared for others. They were wrong. The sickness came without warning. It started in a small village on the eastern continent. Farmers began to feel tired. Their skin stopped glowing. Within days, they could not stand. Within weeks, they were dead. The bodies did not rot in the normal way. They turned gray and crumbled into dust, as if something had eaten them from the inside. The Valkyrie doctors worked day and night to understand what was happening. They called it the withering, because that was exactly what it did. It made living things wither and die, and it spread fast. One village became 10, 10 became 100. Within 3 months, every continent on Velketh Prime had cases of the withering. Elder matriarch Silvara was the leader of the Valkyrie people. She was old, wise, and deeply loved by her kind. Her skin glowed with a steady purple light, the color of wisdom and authority. When the withering began, she did everything a leader could do. She ordered quarantines within cities. She sent her best scientists to study the disease. She prayed to the old gods of her ancestors. But nothing worked. The withering was unlike any sickness the Valkyrie had ever seen. It did not care about quarantines. It spread through the air, through water, through touch. Their medicines were useless against it. Their prayers went unanswered. So Silvara did what any member of the Galactic Concord would do. She called for help. Her first message went to the Dominion, the most powerful species in the Concord. They had great ships and advanced technology. Surely they would send aid. The response came 3 days later. It was short and cold. The Dominion acknowledges the medical emergency on Velketh Prime. However, due to the unknown nature of the pathogen, we cannot risk contamination of Dominion space. All travel between Dominion systems and Velketh Prime is hereby suspended. We wish you well in your efforts. Silvara read the message twice, unable to believe what she was seeing. They were not coming. The most powerful species in the galaxy was not coming to help. She sent another message, this time to the Rathani Collective. The Rathani were famous for their medical knowledge. They had cured diseases that other species thought were impossible to cure. Their response was the same: too dangerous, too risky. They could not help. One by one, Silvara sent messages to every species in the Galactic Concord. 47 messages, 47 pleas for help. She begged, she offered trade agreements, she promised anything they wanted. 47 species said no. Some were polite about it. They expressed sadness and offered their thoughts. Others were blunt. They told the Valkyrie that their planet was already lost and that sending help would be a waste of resources. A few did not bother to respond at all. The Galactic Concord held an emergency meeting to discuss the situation on Velketh Prime. Representatives from all 47 species gathered in the Great Hall of the Concord Station, a massive space station at the center of civilized space. They talked for hours about the withering. Scientists presented data. Military leaders discussed containment options. Politicians argued about responsibility. In the end, they made a decision. Velketh Prime would be quarantined. No ship would be allowed to land on the planet or leave it. Warning beacons would be placed around the entire system. Anyone who tried to break the quarantine would be arrested or destroyed. The planet and its 3 billion inhabitants would be sealed off from the rest of the galaxy. Ambassador Threlvox of the Dominion made the announcement. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. His eyes were black and showed no emotion as he spoke. The Galactic Concord has determined that the pathogen on Velketh Prime poses an unacceptable risk to galactic civilization. In order to protect the greater population, we are implementing a full planetary quarantine. We understand that this decision is difficult, but it is necessary. The needs of the many must outweigh the needs of the few. He paused and looked directly at the recording device that would send his words across the galaxy. To the people of Velketh Prime, we are sorry. We hope that you find a way to survive this crisis. But we cannot risk the lives of trillions to save billions. This is the way of things. The message ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched and accepted the decision. It was logical, they told themselves. It was necessary. The Velkari were unfortunate, but sacrifices had to be made for the greater good. On Velketh Prime, Silvara watched the message with her council. The room was silent. The light from their skin had faded to almost nothing, a sign of deep despair. "They are leaving us to die," said Councillor Velthos, a young male who had always believed in the goodness of the galaxy. "They are just going to watch us die." "We knew this was possible," said another councillor, an old female named Draseth. "The Concord has always valued order over compassion. We should not be surprised." Surprised? Velthos stood up, his skin flickering with orange light, the color of anger. 3 billion of our people are sick and dying. We have been loyal members of the Concord for 3 centuries. We have given them medicine, food, and friendship. And now they throw us away like garbage? Silvara raised her hand, and the room fell silent. She was tired, so very tired. The withering had not reached the capital city yet, but it was only a matter of time. Every day the reports grew worse. Entire regions were going dark as their populations died. "What would you have me do?" she asked softly. "I have begged every species we know. I have offered everything we have. They do not care. To them, we are already dead." She looked at the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the capital. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple. It was beautiful. It had always been beautiful. And soon there would be no one left to see it. "Perhaps this is our fate," Silvara said. "Perhaps the Velkari were always meant to fade away." "No," Councillor Velthos shook his head. "I refuse to accept that. There must be someone out there who will help us, someone who is not afraid." "Who?" Draseth laughed bitterly. "We have contacted everyone. Every species in the Concord has abandoned us. There is no one left." "What about the humans?" Velthos asked. The room went quiet. The humans were the newest species in the galaxy. They had only been part of galactic civilization for 30 years. Their homeworld, called Earth, was on the far edge of known space. They were considered primitive by most standards. Their ships were slow. Their technology was old. They were tolerated by the Concord but not respected. "The humans?" Draseth shook her head. "What could they possibly do? They barely have a dozen colonies. Their military is tiny. They have no real power in the Concord." "But they are different," Velthos insisted. "I have studied them. They do not think like the other species. They have strange customs. They help each other even when it makes no sense. They rush into danger to save strangers. They are emotional, yes, but they are also brave." Silvara considered this. She had met a human once, years ago, at a Concord gathering. He was a scientist named James who studied alien plants. She remembered thinking how strange he was. He smiled too much. He asked too many questions. He seemed genuinely interested in her people, not because they could offer him anything, but simply because he was curious. At the time, she had found it odd. Now she wondered if that oddness might be their last hope. "Send a message to the humans," Silvara said finally. "Tell them everything. Tell them we are dying and that no one will help us. I do not expect anything. But if there is even a small chance..." The message was sent that night. It traveled across the vast distances of space, passing through relay stations and communication networks, until it reached a small listening post on the edge of human space. 3 days later, a response came. Silvara was in her chambers when the communication officer burst through the door. The young Velkari was breathing hard and his skin was glowing bright green, the color of joy. "Matriarch, you must see this!" He handed her a datapad. On it was a message from the human government, something called the United Nations of Earth. It was short, but every word burned with meaning. "We have received your message. We have seen what the Concorde has done. We do not accept their decision. We are sending a ship with medical personnel, supplies, and scientists. They will arrive in 22 days. Hold on, help is coming." Silvara read the message 3 times. Her hands were shaking. Tears fell from her eyes, something that had not happened in decades. "They are coming," she whispered. "The humans are coming." The news spread across Velketh Prime like wildfire. For the first time in months, the Velkari had hope. Their skin began to glow again. They looked up at the stars and waited. 22 days felt like an eternity. Every morning, Silvara checked the sensors, looking for any sign of the human ship. Every night she prayed that they had not changed their minds. The withering continued to spread. More cities fell dark. More Velkari died. The population had dropped from 3 billion to 2.5 billion. Time was running out. On the 21st day, the sensors detected something. A ship was approaching Velketh Prime. It was ignoring the quarantine beacons. It was ignoring the warnings. It was coming straight for them. The ship was unlike anything the Velkari had seen before. It was not elegant like Dominion vessels. It was not smooth like Rathani ships. It was angular and rough, covered in thick armor plates and painted with letters the Velkari could not read. It looked like it had been built for war, but it carried no visible weapons. On its side was a symbol, a blue circle with green and brown inside it. The Velkari would later learn that this was an image of Earth, the human homeworld. The ship entered orbit around Velketh Prime and sent a transmission. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Nations Spaceship Compassion. We are here to help. Please provide landing coordinates." Silvara gave the coordinates herself. She watched from the balcony of the Capitol building as the human ship descended through the clouds. It landed in the great plaza at the center of the city, sending up clouds of dust and leaves. A ramp lowered from the ship. Silvara walked forward, her council behind her. Her skin glowed with a color no Velkari had shown in generations, bright, shining gold. The color of hope. A figure appeared at the top of the ramp. It was a human female. She was shorter than Silvara expected, with dark hair and brown skin. She wore a uniform of blue and white, and her face was set with determination. Behind her, dozens of other humans emerged, carrying cases and equipment. Captain Vasquez walked down the ramp and stopped in front of Silvara. For a moment, the two leaders simply looked at each other. One was ancient and wise, her species on the edge of extinction. The other was young and fierce, from a species that the galaxy considered children. "Elder Matriarch Silvara," Elena said. Her voice was steady and strong. "I am Captain Elena Vasquez. I bring greetings from the people of Earth." "Captain," Silvara replied, her voice trembling, "you have come. Despite everything, you have come. Why? Your people barely know us. You owe us nothing. Why would you risk everything to help strangers?" Elena smiled. It was a warm smile full of kindness and fire. "Because that is what humans do," she said. "We do not turn away from people in need. We do not calculate the value of life. We do not abandon those who are suffering." She stepped forward and took Silvara's hands in her own. "You sent a message to the stars asking for help. Every other species in the galaxy looked away. But we heard you, and we are here." She raised her voice so that everyone in the plaza could hear her. "We are humanity. We do not abandon people. We are with you." The Velkari in the plaza began to glow. Blue and green and gold, their light filled the air like a sunrise. For the first time in months, they did not feel alone. For the first time in months, they believed they might survive. Silvara looked at the human captain, this small, fierce creature from a young world, and she understood something that the ancient species of the galaxy had forgotten. Power was not about technology or wealth or armies. Power was about the willingness to stand up for others. Power was about compassion, and the humans, for all their primitive ways, had more power than anyone in the galaxy had ever imagined. The stars had abandoned the Velkari, but the humans had come, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The first night on Velketh Prime was long and difficult. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the landing ramp of the Compassion and looked out at the alien city. It was beautiful in a way she had never seen before. The buildings were made of a material that looked like crystal, and they glowed softly in the darkness. The trees and plants also produced light, creating a world that never truly went dark. But there was something wrong. Elena could feel it in the air. The city should have been full of life and activity. Instead, it was quiet. Too quiet. Many of the buildings were dark. The streets were empty. The Valkyrie who had gathered to greet them had gone back to their homes, and now only a few soldiers remained to guard the plaza. Commander Marcus Okonkwo walked up beside her. He was her second in command, a tall man with dark skin and kind eyes. He had served with Elena for 10 years, and she trusted him more than anyone else in the universe. "The medical teams are setting up in the building the Valkyrie gave us," he said. "Dr. Tanaka wants to start taking samples first thing in the morning." Elena nodded. Dr. Yuki Tanaka was the best xenobiologist in the human fleet. She was small and quiet, but her mind was sharper than any weapon. If anyone could understand the withering, it was her. "How bad is it?" Elena asked. Marcus was silent for a moment. "Bad," he finally said. "The Valkyrie have lost 500 million people already. The disease is spreading faster than they can track it. Their medical facilities are overwhelmed. They have been burning bodies just to keep up." Elena closed her eyes. 500 million. It was a number too large to really understand. Back on Earth, that would be the entire population of several countries. All those lives, all those families just gone. "And the Concord is really doing nothing?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. "Nothing," Marcus confirmed. "They have ships watching from outside the system, making sure no one leaves. They are treating this planet like a prison." Elena felt anger rise in her chest. She had read the official statements from the Galactic Concord. They talked about containment protocols and acceptable losses and the greater good. They used big words to hide a simple truth. They were letting 3 billion people die because saving them was too hard. "We are not like them," Elena said quietly. "We will never be like them." "No, ma'am," Marcus agreed. "We will not." The next morning, the work began in earnest. Dr. Tanaka and her team of 50 scientists spread out across the city, collecting samples and studying patients. They wore full protective suits, not because they were afraid, but because they did not want to risk carrying the disease back to human space. Every precaution had to be taken. Elena spent the day meeting with Elder Matriarch Silvara and her council. They showed her maps of the planet, explaining where the withering had hit hardest. They shared all their research, all their data, everything they had learned in months of fighting the disease. It was not much. The Valkyrie were skilled healers, famous across the galaxy for their knowledge of organic medicine. But the withering was unlike anything they had ever faced. Their treatments did nothing. Their medicines were useless. The disease simply ignored everything they tried. "We have been fighting for 6 months, Silvara said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "We have lost 200 of our best doctors to the withering. They stayed with their patients until the end. That is our way. We do not abandon those in our care." Elena looked at the old matriarch with new respect. The Valkyrie were dying, but they had not stopped fighting. They had not stopped caring for each other. In that moment, Elena knew that she had made the right choice coming here. "We will find a way," Elena promised. "I do not know how yet, but we will not leave until we do." Silvera's skin flickered with soft blue light. "Why?" she asked. "I asked you before, and you gave me a beautiful answer. But I need to understand. Your people are young. You have so much to lose. Why would you risk everything for us?" Elena thought about the question carefully. It was a fair question, and it deserved a real answer. "Do you know the history of my species?" Elena asked. Silvera shook her head. "I know only a little. You come from a small planet called Earth. You have been traveling the stars for less than 200 years. "That is right," Elena said. "And in those 200 years, we have learned many things. But the most important thing we learned long before we ever left our planet." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Humans have a complicated history. We have done terrible things to each other. Wars, slavery, cruelty of every kind. For thousands of years, we hurt each other again and again. But we also learned something. We learned that the only way to survive was to help each other. When one village suffered, The villages around it would send food. When one nation faced disaster, other nations would send aid. We learned that compassion was not weakness. It was strength. Elena walked to the window and looked out at the glowing city. When we finally reached the stars, we thought we would find species who had learned the same lesson. We thought the galaxy would be full of beings who understood that helping each other was the only way to truly thrive. Instead, we found the Concord, a union of species who calculate the value of life like it is a trading good, who abandon those in need because saving them is too expensive or too risky. She turned back to Silvara. We refuse to become like them. We refuse to forget what we learned on Earth. If we let you die without trying to help, we would lose something more important than ships or trade deals. We would lose who we are. Silvara was silent for a long moment. Then she rose from her seat and walked to Elena. She was much taller than the human captain, but somehow in that moment, they seemed equal. Your species is very strange, Silvara said softly, but perhaps strange is exactly what this galaxy needs. The days turned into weeks. The human teams worked without rest, studying the withering from every possible angle. Dr. Tanaka barely slept, spending long hours in the laboratory, surrounded by samples and data. The withering was a mystery. It attacked the cells of living creatures and broke them down from the inside. But it was not a normal virus or bacteria. It was something else, something artificial. The more Tanaka studied it, the more convinced she became that someone had made this disease on purpose. It is too perfect, she explained to Elena one evening. Natural diseases have weaknesses. They make mistakes. They evolve in random ways. But the withering is different. It is designed to kill. Every part of it works together like a machine. A bioweapon, Elena said grimly. Yes, but not a recent one. Based on the structure, I believe this weapon is thousands of years old. Maybe older. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. If it is that old, why has no one ever developed a cure? Tanaka shook her head. I do not know. Perhaps the species who created it wanted to make sure there would never be a cure. Or perhaps... She paused, a dark look crossing her face. Perhaps someone in the Concord knows about this disease and chose not to share that knowledge. The thought was disturbing. Elena did not want to believe that the Concord would hide information that could save lives. But the more she saw of galactic politics, the less surprised she would be. Meanwhile, the situation on Velketh Prime continued to get worse. The withering had reached the capital city. Every day, more Velkari fell sick. The hospitals were overflowing. The cremation fires burned day and night. The human medical teams did what they could. They could not cure the withering, but they could make the sick more comfortable. They brought pain medication and clean water. They sat with dying patients and held their hands. They gave the Velkari something that no one else in the galaxy had offered. Simple human kindness. Word of the humans spread across the planet. Stories were told of these strange creatures who had crossed the galaxy to help strangers, who wore clumsy suits and spoke with odd accents, but never stopped working, who cried when their patients died and celebrated when they got better, who treated every Velkari life like it was precious. The Velkari began calling them the Light Bringers. It was the highest honor their culture could give to outsiders. But not everyone was happy about the human presence on Velketh Prime. 3 weeks after the Compassion landed, a fleet of Dominion warships arrived at the edge of the system. There were 12 of them, each one larger than any ship humanity had ever built. They took position around the quarantine zone and waited. Then the message came. Ambassador Threlvox appeared on the communication screen of the Compassion. His four-armed form was rigid with authority, his black eyes cold. Captain Vasquez, he said, his voice flat and dangerous, you have violated the quarantine protocols established by the Galactic Concord. You have entered a restricted zone without permission. You have put galactic civilization at risk. The Concord demands that you withdraw immediately. Elena stood in front of the screen, her arms crossed. Behind her, her bridge crew watched in tense silence. Ambassador Threlvox, Elena replied, we have received your demand. We refuse. For a moment, Threlvox seemed surprised. He was not used to being refused. The Dominion was the most powerful species in the Concord. When they gave orders, others obeyed. You refuse, he repeated. Perhaps you do not understand the situation, Captain. Those ships outside your system are warships. They are fully armed and ready for combat. If you do not withdraw, we will be forced to take action. Then take action, Elena said. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. But know this, we are not here to fight. We are here to save lives. Every hour you spend threatening us is an hour we could be helping the Valkyrie. Every ship you send to intimidate us is a ship that could be carrying medicine and supplies. You want to stop us? Fine. Destroy us. Blow our ship out of the sky. But you will have to explain to the entire galaxy why you murdered doctors and scientists who were trying to help. Threlvox was silent for a long moment, his four hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. You are making a mistake, he finally said. The Conquered will not forget this. There will be consequences for your species. I am sure there will be, Elena agreed. And when those consequences come, we will face them. But we will face them with clean hands and clear consciences. Can you say the same, Ambassador? She ended the transmission. The bridge was silent. Then slowly, Commander Okonkwo began to applaud. The rest of the crew joined in. Elena allowed herself a small smile, but inside she was worried. She had just challenged the most powerful species in the galaxy. She had put her ship, her crew, and possibly her entire civilization at risk. But she had also done the right thing, and that had to count for something. 2 days later, word came from Earth. The United Nations had held an emergency session to discuss the situation. Representatives from every nation had gathered to debate whether humanity should continue to support the mission to Velketh Prime. The Conquered had already begun its punishment. Human trading ships were being turned away from galactic ports. Contracts were being canceled. Colonies that depended on galactic trade were starting to feel the pressure. The debate was fierce. Some argued that humanity could not afford to anger the Concord. They were too small, too weak, too young. They should withdraw from Velketh Prime, apologize, and try to rebuild their relationship with the galactic community. But others disagreed. They spoke about human values and human dignity. They talked about the lessons of history, about the times when nations had stood by and watched atrocities happen because getting involved was too difficult. They said that if humanity abandoned the Valkyrie now, they would be no better than the species who had already turned their backs. In the end, the vote was not even close. We stay, the Secretary General of the United Nations announced. Whatever the cost, we stay. We will not abandon people in need. That is not who we are. When Elena heard the news, she went to her quarters and cried, not from sadness, but from pride. She had always believed in humanity, but sometimes it was hard to keep that faith. Sometimes the darkness of the universe made her wonder if compassion could ever truly win. Now she had her answer. Her people had looked at the threats and the consequences and the pressure from the greatest powers in the galaxy, and they had said no. They had chosen to be good, even when being good was hard. She wiped her eyes and returned to work. There was still a disease to cure, still lives to save. The galaxy might be against them, but humanity was just getting started. And somewhere in the laboratory, Dr. Tanaka was looking at her samples with new determination. The answer was there, hidden in the cells and molecules of the withering. She just had to find it. The race against time continued, but for the first time, hope was winning. The Great Hall of Concord Station was the largest room ever built in the galaxy. Its ceiling reached so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Its walls were made of a metal that had been mined from the core of a dead star. Every surface was covered in symbols and flags representing the 47 species of the Galactic Concord. At the center of the hall stood a circular platform where the Council of Species met to decide the fate of worlds. Today, the platform was crowded with representatives from across the galaxy. They had come to discuss a problem that was quickly becoming a crisis: the human problem. Ambassador David Chen stood alone on one side of the platform. He was a small man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had been humanity's representative to the Concord for 15 years, longer than any other human diplomat. He had learned to navigate the complex politics of galactic civilization. He had made friends and enemies. He had fought for human interests at every turn, but he had never faced a challenge like this. On the other side of the platform stood the representatives of the most powerful species in the Concord. Ambassador Threlvox of the Dominion was there. His forearms crossed over his chest, his black eyes fixed on Chen with cold hatred. Beside him stood Ambassador Valrine of the Rathani Collective, a tall being with silver skin and three eyes that never blinked. There was Ambassador Krog of the Melithian Empire, a massive creature covered in thick armor plates, and Ambassador Sethus of the Vorn Hegemony, whose body seemed to be made entirely of flowing shadows. They were the Big Four, the species that truly controlled the galactic concord. For centuries, they had made the rules that everyone else followed. They were not happy that a young, primitive species was challenging their authority. "We have gathered today to address a violation of conquered law," Threlvox began, his voice echoing through the Great Hall. "The human species has broken our quarantine protocols. They have entered a restricted zone. They have put all of galactic civilization at risk. This cannot be allowed to stand." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. Most of the smaller species were afraid to disagree with the Dominion. They had seen what happened to those who challenged the Big Four. "Ambassador Chen," Threlvox continued, turning his cold gaze to the human, "you have been given the opportunity to explain your species' actions. Speak now." David Chen stepped forward. He was surrounded by hostile faces, standing alone against the combined power of the galaxy's greatest civilizations. But his voice did not shake. "Honored representatives," he began, "I thank you for this opportunity to speak. Yes, humanity has broken your quarantine. Yes, we have entered the Velketh system. But I must ask you all a question. What exactly are we guilty of?" He paused and looked around the hall. "Are we guilty of bringing medicine to the sick? Are we guilty of providing food to the hungry? Are we guilty of offering comfort to the dying? If these are crimes, then yes, humanity is guilty. But I would ask every being in this hall to look inside themselves and ask, should compassion be a crime?" Ambassador Valrine of the Rathani spoke, her voice smooth and cold. "Ambassador Chen, you speak of compassion, but you ignore reality. The withering is a deadly pathogen. By entering the quarantine zone, your species risks spreading it to other worlds. You are not being compassionate. You are being reckless." "With respect, Ambassador," Chen replied, "our medical teams have followed strict containment protocols. We have not left the planet. We have not allowed any person or object to leave without thorough decontamination. In 3 months on Velketh Prime, not a single case of the withering has appeared anywhere else. We are not spreading the disease. We are fighting it." "But you cannot win!" Krog of the Melithian Empire slammed one of his armored fists against the platform. "The withering has no cure. Your scientists are wasting their time. And when they fail, when the disease mutates and spreads to your ships, you will carry it back to your homeworld. You will doom your own species because of your foolish emotions." Chen smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Perhaps we will fail. Perhaps the withering cannot be cured, but we have to try. That is what being human means. We do not give up on people just because saving them is difficult. "You do not give up because you are children," Threlvox said, contempt dripping from his voice. "You have been part of galactic civilization for barely 30 years. You do not understand how things work. You do not understand that sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good." "I understand perfectly," Chen replied, his voice growing harder. "I understand that you have written off 3 billion people because saving them requires effort. I understand that you would rather watch an entire species die than risk anything of your own. I understand that your greater good means protecting yourselves while the weak are left to suffer." He stepped forward, his eyes blazing with anger that he had kept hidden until now. "Let me tell you something about humanity, Ambassador. We have a history, just like every species in this hall. And in our history, we have seen what happens when the powerful decide that some lives do not matter. We have seen the horrors that follow when good people stand by and do nothing. We made a promise to ourselves, a promise written in the blood of millions. Never again." His voice rose, filling the great hall. "Never again will we watch innocent people die and do nothing. Never again will we calculate the value of life and decide that some are not worth saving. Never again will we be the species that looks away. And if that makes us children in your eyes, then so be it. But we will be children with clean consciences and open hearts. Can any of you say the same?" The hall was silent. Many of the representatives looked uncomfortable. A few of the smaller species were nodding quietly, careful not to attract attention. But Threlvox was unmoved. Pretty words, Ambassador, but words do not change reality. The Concord has made its decision. The quarantine will remain in place, and if humanity continues to violate it, there will be consequences. He raised one of his four hands and made a gesture. A holographic display appeared in the center of the platform, showing a map of human space. As we speak, sanctions are being implemented against your species. Human trading ships are being denied access to Concord ports. Contracts with human companies are being terminated. Supplies to your colonies are being reduced. This is only the beginning. He looked at Chen with cold satisfaction. You have 12 colonies outside your home system, Ambassador. Each one depends on trade with the Concord for survival. Food, medicine, technology, all of it flows through our networks. If we cut you off completely, your colonies will starve within 2 years. Your people will suffer. Your civilization will collapse. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Is that what you want, Ambassador? To doom your own species for the sake of the Valkyrie? Think carefully before you answer. The fate of humanity rests on your decision. David Chen looked at the holographic map. He saw the small dots representing human colonies, each one home to thousands of his people. He thought about the children on those worlds, the families, the dreams and hopes that would be destroyed if the Concord followed through on its threats. It would be so easy to surrender, so easy to apologize and withdraw and save his people from the coming storm. No one would blame him. Even the Valkyrie would understand. But then he thought about Captain Vasquez and her crew, working day and night on Velketh Prime. He thought about Dr. Tanaka, searching for a cure that everyone said was impossible. He thought about the Valkyrie, their glowing skin and gentle ways, their belief that the humans were their last hope. He thought about what it meant to be human. The fate of humanity does not rest on my decision, Chen said finally. It rests on the decisions of every human being, from the leaders in our capitals to the workers in our factories, and we have already made our choice. He turned away from Threlvox and addressed the entire hall. Before I came here today, I received a message from the United Nations of Earth. Our government held an emergency vote on this matter. Representatives from every nation on our planet came together to decide what we should do. They knew about your threats. They knew about the sanctions. They knew what would happen if we defied you. He paused, letting the silence build. They voted unanimously to continue our mission to Velketh Prime. Not one nation voted to abandon the Valkyrie. Not one. Because we believe that some things are more important than trade deals and comfort. We believe that our character as a species is defined by how we treat those who cannot help themselves. He looked directly at Threlvox. So do your worst, Ambassador. Cut off our trade. Starve our colonies. Send your warships. We will suffer, yes. We will struggle. Some of us may even die. But we will not abandon people who need our help. That is not who we are. That is not who we will ever be. He straightened his back and spoke his final words with absolute conviction. We are humanity. We stay. The hall erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted at each other. The Big Four huddled together, clearly angry and confused. No one had ever defied them like this before. No one had ever called their bluff with such certainty. But in the chaos, something else was happening. Small groups of representatives from the lesser species were gathering in corners, speaking quietly among themselves. Many of them had never liked the way the Concord treated weaker civilizations. Many of them had been afraid to speak up, afraid of what the Big Four would do. Now they saw humanity, the youngest and weakest species in the Concord, standing alone against the greatest powers in the galaxy. And they saw something they had forgotten existed. Courage. Ambassador Chen walked out of the Great Hall with his head held high. He knew that the coming months would be difficult. The sanctions were real. The threats were real. His people would suffer. But as he left, he noticed something. Several representatives from smaller species nodded at him as he passed. A few even whispered words of encouragement. One, a small creature from a species called the Teleth, pressed something into his hand, a data chip containing supply routes that the Concord did not control. For your colonies, the Teleth whispered, Some of us have not forgotten what compassion means. Chen closed his hand around the chip and smiled. The galaxy was not as united against humanity as it seemed. There were cracks in the Concord, hidden currents of dissent that had been suppressed for centuries. Perhaps in standing up for the Valkyrie, humanity had awakened something. Perhaps other species were finally ready to question the cold calculus of the Big Four. Perhaps change was possible. It was a small hope, fragile and uncertain, but it was hope nonetheless. As Chen boarded the shuttle that would take him back to Earth, he sent a message to Captain Vasquez on Velketh Prime. The Concord has rejected our appeals. Sanctions are coming. Things will be hard for a while, but we are not alone. Keep working. Keep saving lives. Whatever happens, know that you have made humanity proud. The response came an hour later. It was short and perfect. Understood. We are with you too. And across the galaxy, in meeting rooms and laboratories and homes, beings of all species watched the news feeds and talked about what had happened in the Great Hall. They talked about the young species that had defied the oldest powers. They talked about the words Ambassador Chen had spoken, words that seemed to echo through the void of space. Never again will we watch innocent people die and do nothing. We are humanity. We stay. Some called the humans fools. Some called them heroes. But everyone agreed on one thing. The galaxy would never be the same. The old order was beginning to tremble. And on Velketh Prime, where 3 billion lives hung in the balance, humanity kept working, kept hoping, kept fighting for a cure that everyone said was impossible, because that was who they were, and they would not stop until they had won or died trying. 6 months had passed since the Compassion landed on Velketh Prime. 6 months of endless work, sleepless nights, and heartbreaking losses. 6 months of fighting a disease that refused to be beaten. Dr. Yuki Tanaka sat alone in her laboratory, staring at the screens that surrounded her. The data scrolled past in endless streams of numbers and charts. She had memorized every piece of it. She had studied the withering from every possible angle. She had tried hundreds of different treatments, each one more desperate than the last. Nothing worked. The withering was a perfect killer. It attacked the cells of its victims and turned their own bodies against them. Every treatment that Tanaka tried was absorbed and destroyed. Every medicine was neutralized. The disease seemed to anticipate every move she made, as if it had been designed to defeat any cure, because it had been. Tanaka had confirmed her earlier suspicions. The withering was not a natural disease. It was a weapon, created thousands of years ago during a war that had been erased from galactic history. Someone, somewhere, had designed this horror and unleashed it on the universe. And now it was killing the Valkyrie, just as it had killed countless others before them. She pushed back from her desk and rubbed her tired eyes. Through the window, she could see the city below. Once, it had been a beautiful place, full of light and life. Now half the buildings were dark. The Valkyrie were dying faster than ever. 2 billion had already perished. 1 billion remained, and each day that number grew smaller. Captain Vasquez walked into the laboratory. She looked as tired as Tanaka felt. The past months had aged both of them. Their hair had grayed, their faces had grown thin, but neither of them had given up. "Any progress?" Vasquez asked, though she already knew the answer. Tanaka shook her head. "I am running out of ideas, Captain. I have tried everything I know. Everything the Valkyrie know. Everything in our combined databases. The withering defeats it all." Vasquez sat down beside her. For a moment they were silent, two exhausted women carrying the weight of billions of lives on their shoulders. "What about the other species?" Vasquez asked. "The ones who have been helping us secretly?" In the months since the Concord had imposed sanctions, something unexpected had happened. Several smaller species had begun to quietly support humanity's efforts. They smuggled supplies through hidden routes. They shared data from their own research archives. They took great risks to help, even though they were terrified of what the Big Four would do if they were discovered. "I have gone through all the data they sent," Tanaka said. "Most of it is useless. The Rathani research is incomplete. They stopped studying the withering centuries ago when they realized they could not cure it. The Teleth data is outdated. The Vasari records are corrupted." She paused, frowning. But there was one piece of information that caught my attention. It came from a species called the archivists. They are record keepers, historians. They store knowledge from all over the galaxy. What did they send? Tanaka pulled up a file on her screen. It showed an ancient document, covered in symbols that Tanaka could not read. According to the archivists, the Withering was created during something called the Shadow War. It happened over 8,000 years ago, before most current species had developed space travel. Two great empires fought each other to extinction. The Withering was their final weapon. It wiped out both civilizations completely. Vasquez leaned forward, studying the document. If both empires were destroyed, how does this help us? Because the war did not happen instantly, Tanaka explained. It took decades. During that time, scientists on both sides tried to develop a cure. The archivists have fragments of their research, pieces of data that survived the destruction. And one of those fragments mentions something called the Harmony Protocol. According to the records, it was a theoretical treatment that showed promise. But the war ended before it could be completed. The scientists who were working on it were killed, and their research was lost. Vasquez felt a spark of hope, but she forced it down. She had learned not to hope too much. Theoretical treatment? That does not sound like a cure. It is not, Tanaka admitted. It is barely even a starting point. But it is more than we had before. The Harmony Protocol was based on a completely different approach than anything I have tried. Instead of fighting the Withering directly, it tried to make the victim's cells work together differently, to harmonize their immune response in a way the disease could not predict. She turned to face Vasquez, and for the first time in weeks, there was light in her eyes. I think I can build on this. It will take time we do not have. And I need something that I cannot get here. What do you need? Velkari genetic samples from before the Withering appeared. Healthy samples, untouched by the disease. With those, I might be able to create a template for the Harmony Protocol, a way to reset the victim's cells to their original state. Vasquez thought about this. The Velkari have been infected for almost a year. Is there anywhere on the planet where we could find uncontaminated samples? A voice spoke from the doorway. There might be. They turned to see Counselor Velthos standing at the entrance to the laboratory. The young Velkari had been working closely with the humans since they arrived. His skin glowed with a mixture of colors, hope, fear, and determination all at once. There is a place called the Vault of Origins, he said. It is a sacred site, deep beneath the northern mountains. Our ancestors stored genetic samples there thousands of years ago, when our civilization was young. If those samples have survived, they would be pure, completely free of the Withering. Can you take us there? Tanaka asked, her voice urgent. It is a dangerous journey. The northern regions have been hit hard by the disease. Many Velkari have fled to the south, but some remain, the sick and the dying. And the mountains themselves are treacherous. I do not care about danger, Tanaka said. If there is even a chance, Velthos nodded slowly, then I will take you. If the vault can help save my people, it is worth any risk. The expedition left the next morning. Tanaka took a small team of scientists and medical personnel. Captain Vasquez insisted on coming too, despite Tanaka's protests. Commander Okonkwo remained at the capital to manage the relief efforts. The journey north was everything Velthos had warned. The beautiful landscape of Velketh Prime had been transformed by the Withering. Forests that once glowed with gentle light were now dark and silent. Villages stood empty, their populations either dead or fled. The air itself seemed heavy with grief. They traveled in a Velkari transport vehicle, modified to handle the rough mountain terrain. As they climbed higher into the northern ranges, the temperature dropped and the path grew more dangerous. Several times they had to stop and clear debris from the road. On the third day, they reached the entrance to the Vault of Origins. It was carved into the side of a massive mountain, its door made of the same crystalline material as the buildings in the capital. Ancient symbols were etched into the stone, words in a language that even the Velkari no longer fully understood. This place was built by our earliest ancestors, Velthos explained, his voice filled with reverence. They knew that someday our species might face a threat that could destroy us. They created the vault to preserve our heritage, our history, and our genetic legacy. No living Valkyrie has entered it in over 2,000 years. He placed his hand on a panel beside the door. It glowed briefly, reading his genetic signature. Then, with a deep rumble, the door began to open. The inside of the vault was vast and silent. Great pillars of crystal rose toward a ceiling that disappeared into darkness. The walls were lined with alcoves, each one containing a glowing container, thousands of them, stretching off into the distance. The samples, Velthos breathed. They are still here. Tanaka moved quickly, her scientific instincts taking over. She began scanning the containers, looking for the ones that held genetic material. Most contained cultural artifacts, art, literature, records of ancient events. But deeper in the vault, she found what she was looking for. Rows upon rows of genetic samples preserved in stasis fields that had been running for millennia. Perfectly pure, completely untouched by the withering or any other contamination. "This is it," Tanaka said, her hands trembling as she carefully extracted one of the samples. "This is exactly what I need." They worked for hours, collecting as many samples as they could safely transport. Tanaka was careful to take only what was necessary. The vault was a sacred place, and she did not want to disturb it more than she had to. As they prepared to leave, Velthos stood at the center of the vault, his skin glowing with soft blue light. He seemed to be praying. "What are you doing?" Vasquez asked gently. "I am speaking to my ancestors," Velthos replied. "I am telling them that their gift may save us, that after all these thousands of years, the vault has fulfilled its purpose." He turned to face the humans, and there were tears in his eyes. "You came from across the galaxy to help strangers. You have worked and suffered and sacrificed for our people, and now you may have found a way to save us. I do not have words to express what this means, but I want you to know that whatever happens, the Valkyrie will never forget you. Your names will be remembered for as long as our species exists." Vasquez felt tears forming in her own eyes. She had been trained to be strong, to lead without showing weakness. But in this moment, surrounded by the legacy of an ancient people, she could not hold back her emotions. "Let's make sure your species exists for a very long time," she said softly. "We have work to do." They returned to the capital in record time. Tanaka barely slept during the journey, her mind racing with possibilities. She had the samples. She had the fragments of the Harmony Protocol. Now she just had to put the pieces together. The next 2 months were the most intense of her life. She worked 18 hours a day, surrounded by data and experiments and failing simulations. Her team worked in shifts, but Tanaka never stopped. She could not stop. Every hour she wasted, more Valkyrie died. Slowly, agonizingly, the pieces began to fit together. The Harmony Protocol was based on a principle that no one had ever tried before. Instead of attacking the withering directly, it reprogrammed the victim's cells to recognize the disease as part of themselves. The withering could defeat foreign substances, but it could not defeat something that looked exactly like the host. The key was the genetic samples from the vault. They provided a template, a perfect record of what Valkyrie cells should look like before the withering corrupted them. Using this template, Tanaka could create a treatment that would reset infected cells to their original state. It was brilliant, it was elegant, and after 700 failed attempts, it finally worked. The first successful trial happened at 3 in the morning on a cold night in the 8th month of the mission. Tanaka had injected the treatment into a dying Valkyrie named Corvel, a young male who had been sick for weeks. His family had already said their goodbyes. Everyone expected him to die before dawn. Instead, he woke up. His skin, which had been gray and dim, began to glow again. His breathing, which had been weak and shallow, grew strong. His eyes, which had been clouded with the withering, became clear. "Where am I?" he asked, looking around the medical tent in confusion. "What happened?" Tanaka could not speak. She could not move. She could only stare at the impossible miracle in front of her. Captain Vasquez burst into the tent moments later, alerted by one of the medical staff. She looked at Corvel, looked at the data on Tanaka's screens, and understood immediately. "You did it," she whispered. "Oh my God, Yuki, you did it." Tanaka finally found her voice. "We need to test it more. We need larger trials. We need to make sure it is not a fluke." But it was not a fluke. Over the next week, they treated 100 more patients, then 1,000, then 10,000. Every single one recovered. The cure worked. Word spread across Velketh Prime like fire. The disease that had killed billions, the disease that the entire galaxy had said was unstoppable, humanity had found a cure. Elder matriarch Silvera came to the laboratory to see Tanaka personally. The old leader had aged terribly during the crisis. Her skin was dim, and her movements were slow. But when she saw the evidence of Tanaka's success, she glowed brighter than she had in years. "You have saved us," Silvera said, taking Tanaka's hands in her own. "You have saved my people." "I just did my job," Tanaka replied, suddenly embarrassed by all the attention. "No," Silvera said firmly. "You did more than your job. You did what no one else in the galaxy was willing to do. You gave us hope when we had none. You fought for us when everyone else had abandoned us. You are more than a scientist, Dr. Tanaka. You are a miracle." She turned to face the cameras that were broadcasting her words across the planet and beyond. "Let the galaxy hear this," Silvera declared, her voice strong and proud. "The humans came when no one else would. They gave us back our future. The withering is defeated. Our people will survive. And we owe everything to the species that calls itself humanity." Her words echoed across the stars, reaching every corner of civilized space. The Concord, the Dominion, the countless species who had watched and waited and done nothing. They all heard the news. They all knew what had happened, and nothing would ever be the same again. The news of the cure spread across the galaxy like a wave. It traveled through communication networks and trade routes, from station to station and world to world. Within days, every sentient being in civilized space knew what had happened on Velketh Prime. The reactions were as varied as the species themselves. In the halls of the Dominion, there was shock and anger. Ambassador Threlvox threw a datapad against the wall of his office when he heard the news. The humans had done the impossible. They had cured a disease that the greatest civilizations in the galaxy had declared unstoppable. Everything he had said, every prediction he had made, was wrong. How, he demanded of his advisors, how could primitives accomplish what we could not? His advisors had no answer. They had all believed that the humans would fail. They had all expected the Velkari to die, and the foolish young species to learn its lesson. Instead, humanity had succeeded, and now the entire political landscape of the galaxy was shifting. In the Rathani Collective, there was something close to shame. They were the greatest medical minds in the Concord. They had studied diseases for thousands of years, but they had given up on the withering. They had decided it was impossible to cure and walked away. Now a species with barely 2 centuries of spaceflight had shown them what was possible when you refused to give up. Some Rathani scientists were already reaching out to their human counterparts, asking for details of the cure. They wanted to learn from it, to understand how it worked. A few were even beginning to question the cold logic that had guided their civilization for so long. In the smaller species of the Concord, there was something else: hope. For centuries they had lived in the shadow of the Big Four. They had followed orders, paid tributes, and kept their mouths shut. They had watched countless tragedies unfold and done nothing because they were afraid. Now they saw humanity standing tall despite the threats and sanctions. They saw a young species that had risked everything to help strangers. They saw that it was possible to defy the old order and win. Quiet conversations began in private chambers across the galaxy. Representatives of a dozen species talked about what they had seen. They talked about the possibility of change. They talked about a future where compassion mattered more than cold calculation. The seeds of revolution were being planted. On Velketh Prime, the work continued. The cure was effective, but producing enough for 1 billion people was an enormous challenge. Human ships brought supplies from Earth, despite the ongoing sanctions. Velkari factories worked day and night to manufacture the treatment. Slowly the tide turned. Hospitals that had been filled with the dying began to empty as patients recovered. Cities that had gone dark came back to life. The bioluminescence of the Velkari people, which had faded during the months of despair, began to shine again. Everywhere Captain Vasquez looked, she saw signs of recovery. But she also saw something else. She saw Velkari looking at humans with an expression she had never seen before. It was more than gratitude. It was more than respect. It was a deep, unshakable bond that transcended language and culture. The Velkari had a word for it: Talanari. It meant bound by light, a connection that could never be broken. They had given this name to the humans. They had made them part of their family. 2 months after the cure was announced, Elder Matriarch Silvara called a great gathering in the capital. Every Valkyrie who could attend came to the central plaza, filling the streets and rooftops. Billions more watched through broadcasts from across the planet. The humans were there too. Captain Vasquez, Commander Okonkwo, Dr. Tanaka, and the hundreds of crew members who had served on Velketh Prime. They stood on a platform beside Silvara, facing the enormous crowd. "My children," Silvara began, her voice carrying across the plaza through amplifiers. "We have survived the darkest time in our history. The withering took so many of us. Loved ones, friends, entire communities. We will never forget those we lost. We will carry their memories in our hearts forever." She paused, letting the grief of the moment wash over the crowd. The Valkyrie glowed softly, their light flickering with shared sorrow. "But we have also gained something precious. We have found true friends in the universe. When every other species abandoned us, when the galaxy wrote us off as dead, the humans came. They did not know us. They owed us nothing. But they came anyway because that is who they are." She turned to face Captain Vasquez. "Captain Elena Vasquez, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, and all the humans who served on Velketh Prime, you are no longer strangers to us. From this day forward, you are Talinari. You are bound to us by light, by love, and by gratitude that will last for all eternity." The crowd erupted in cheers. The glow of 1,000,000,000 Valkyrie filled the sky with colors that had not been seen in centuries. It was a celebration of survival, of hope, and of the unexpected friendship that had saved them. Captain Vasquez stepped forward to address the crowd. She was not used to public speaking, and her voice trembled slightly as she began. "I am not good with word," she admitted. "I am a soldier, not a diplomat. But I want to say something to all of you." She looked out at the sea of glowing faces. "When we received your message asking for help, many people on Earth were afraid. They said we were too weak to make a difference. They said we would fail and doom ourselves along with you. But we did not listen to the fear. We listened to something else, something that my species learned long ago." She took a deep breath. "We learned that true strength is not about power or technology or wealth. True strength is about standing up for others, even when it costs you. True strength is about doing the right thing, even when the right thing is hard. That is what it means to be human. And seeing your faces, seeing the light that has returned to your world. I know we made the right choice." She raised her voice. "The galaxy told us that compassion was weakness. But look at us now. Look at what compassion accomplished. A species that was dying is alive again. A friendship has been formed that will last forever. And the old ways of thinking, the cold calculations and the acceptable losses have been proven wrong." The crowd cheered again, even louder than before. But the greatest moment was yet to come. 1 month later, the Galactic Concord convened a special session. For the first time in history, representatives of the Valkyrie were invited to speak. And for the first time in history, they were not alone. Ambassador David Chen walked into the Great Hall with Elder Matriarch Silvara at his side. Behind them came representatives from 11 other species, the Teleth, the Vasari, the Ketherani, and others who had secretly helped humanity during the crisis. They had finally decided to step out of the shadows and stand with their new allies. The Big Four watched in silent fury as the delegation took its place on the platform. This was not how things were supposed to work. The lesser species were supposed to be obedient and quiet. They were not supposed to challenge the established order, but the order had already been challenged, and it was crumbling. Chen addressed the council with a calm confidence that had not been there before. The past year had changed him. He had seen the worst of the galaxy and the best of his own species. He was no longer afraid. "Honored representatives," he began, "we are here today to announce the formation of a new alliance. It is called the Compact of Light, and its founding principles are simple: mutual aid, compassion, and the protection of all sentient life." He gestured to the delegates behind him. "The species you see with me have chosen to join this compact. They have chosen to believe in a different vision of the galaxy, a vision where no world is abandoned, where no people are left to die, where the strong helped the weak instead of exploiting them. Ambassador Threlvox interrupted, his voice dripping with contempt. A pretty speech, Ambassador, but what exactly does this compact intend to do? Challenge the Concord? You are a handful of minor species led by primitives. You have no real power. Chen smiled. It was a confident smile, almost amused. You are right, Ambassador. We are small. We are weak. By your standards, we have no power at all. But let me ask you something. What did the Concord accomplish during the Valkyrie crisis? You sent warships to enforce a quarantine. You watched 3 billion people die. You calculated that their lives were not worth saving. He let the words hang in the air. And what did we accomplish? We saved them. With our primitive technology and our emotional foolishness, we cured an ancient plague that your greatest scientists had given up on. We proved that compassion is not weakness. We proved that refusing to give up can accomplish miracles. He stepped forward, his voice rising. So yes, we are small. Yes, we are weak. But we have something you do not have. We have the courage to try. We have the faith to believe that doing the right thing matters. And we have the stubbornness to keep fighting even when everyone says we will fail. He turned to address the entire hall, not just the Big Four. To every species watching this broadcast, to every world that has ever felt abandoned by the Concord, we say this: you are not alone. The compact of light will stand with you. When you face disaster, we will come. When you need help, we will answer. When the galaxy turns its back on you, we will be there. Elder Matriarch Silvera stepped forward beside him. Her skin blazed with golden light, the color of hope and promise. I speak for the Valkyrie, she said, her ancient voice filled with power. We owe our survival to humanity. We have seen what true courage looks like. We have learned that the measure of a species is not its technology or its wealth, but its willingness to stand for those who cannot stand alone. She looked at the Big Four with something that might have been pity. You wrote us off. You decided we were not worth saving. But the humans came. They looked at 3 billion dying people and said, we will not let this happen. They gave us back our future, and now we stand with them, not because we owe them, though we do, but because they have shown us what is possible when beings care for each other. She raised her voice, and it echoed through the great hall. The old order is ending, a new age is beginning, and its foundation will not be fear or power or cold calculation. Its foundation will be compassion. Its foundation will be hope. Its foundation will be the simple, powerful truth that the humans taught us. We are stronger together than we ever could be alone. The hall was silent. The Big Four had no response. For the first time in centuries, they had been completely outmaneuvered, not by military force or economic pressure, but by ideas, by hope, by love. In the weeks that followed, the compact of light grew. Species that had been afraid to speak up joined openly. Resources flowed to those in need. Scientific knowledge was shared freely. Trade networks formed that bypassed the Concord completely. The old order did not collapse overnight. The Dominion and its allies still had enormous power. There would be conflicts and setbacks in the years to come. But the tide had turned. The galaxy was changing. And at the center of that change was humanity. The young species that had refused to look away, refused to calculate the cost of compassion, refused to let fear dictate their actions. On Velketh Prime, a monument was erected in the central plaza of the capital. It was a simple structure, a pillar of crystal with a blue and green sphere at its top, representing Earth. Beneath it, a plaque bore an inscription in every language of the compact. When the galaxy looked away, they looked toward us. When others calculated the cost, they paid it without question. They taught us that the measure of a species is not its technology or its power, but its willingness to stand for those who cannot stand alone. And below that, the words that had started it all: we are humanity. We are with you. Captain Elena Vasquez returned to Earth a hero, though she never thought of herself that way. She continued to serve, leading missions to other worlds in need. Dr. Yuki Tanaka became the most famous scientist in human history, her work inspiring generations of researchers. Ambassador David Chen retired to write a book about galactic politics, though he was often called back for advice. But the true legacy of what happened on Velketh Prime was not about individuals. It was about an idea that spread through the galaxy like light through darkness. The idea that compassion was not weakness. The idea that helping others was the highest form of strength. The idea that even the smallest species could change the universe, if only they had the courage to try. Years later, on worlds that had never heard of Earth, a new phrase entered the language of hope. When disaster struck, when all seemed lost, beings of 100 different species would look up at the stars and whisper the words that had become a prayer and a promise. Call the humans. They come when no one else will. And somewhere in the vastness of space, humanity heard, and humanity answered. Because that was who they were. That was who they would always be. And the galaxy was better for it.